Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 Chicago traffic update.
On I-80 eastbound, there's...
Hey, everybody. How you doing? How you doing? Hey. Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you. It's a day-to-day thing, but God is good and ever faithful.
Dalton Avenue, there's road construction in the two left lanes, and there is also a collision
God is
in
good
that
and
area
ever
past 130th
faithful.
on the right
God
side.
is good and ever
Trip
faithful.
time for the
Ever
Ryan
faithful.
split to 8094 is 21 minutes. Inbound it's 11.
I got Reverend Williams.
Okay, Reverend, how you doing?
About at Taylor.
Good. How are you?
Oh, girl, I was just saying to Linda over here that God is ever faithful.
Inbound Stevenson is tight.
That's it. That's it.
You know?
Okay,
I'll call you a little bit
if you're like
later.
me and still doing your back to school shopping, one word, Kohl's.
Well,
Right
God
now,
is
we have the
good.
best deals on the brands my kids love. I got my
But
son
it has
Converse
been
sneakers
a
for $60,
trying week.
25% off
No
pants
question
for my
about
daughter,
that.
and 25% off Nike
But,
gear
you
for
know,
both of them. Oh, but the
if these
best
things
part, I
happen,
got an extra 20% off and Kohl's.
tough
I'm
never
a
last.
little something for
Tough
myself.
people do.
Flex styles, Vans
And
Converse,
that is all that, that's all that you
20%
need to
off
know.
August
How about
29th.
that?
Some exclusions apply. See Circles for comfort details.
Tom,
So that
It looks
is,
to me like the only
so I'm
explanation
trying
I
to
can
pull
come
a
up
couple
with
of these
is that
other
they
little
want more people
pieces
to die.
up.
Now, why would they want more people to die? Well,
Okay.
because if they can get the pandemic
Right.
rolling again here in the United States, it will
Right.
cause states to shut down. And if states shut
Okay,
down,
great.
then the economy goes in the tank.
Okay,
And if the
great.
economy goes in the tank, the party in power always loses the next election.
But everyone, that's why I'm so glad I've been talking about COVID, because it's very real. But also, everybody, even when you've gotten these shots, you can still get it. Okay? You got to know that. Even when you get the shots, you can still get it. So, and no harm, no foul is just how this thing works. So, what you want to do is try and get your immune system together to handle whatever. Okay? So, my Facebook is acting crazy today.
Chicago
Has been since yesterday.
WCPT 820.
Really?
Here we go.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, Friday, August 27th, 2021. They're going to be in Washington, D.C. tomorrow for the anniversary march. There'll be a few marches, but they will all be coming together of the March on Washington for Jobs and Justice from 1963, wow, 58 years ago. And so we're sending our love and prayers out to Bishop William Barber, Reverend Al Sharpton, Attorney Barbara Arnwine, and so many others who are leading these efforts looking at voting rights and jobs and creating peace and justice in the United States and all around the world. I'm Santita Jackson. Please, nation's largest progressive talk radio station. We've got the best talk radio that's progressive in the country. Of course, along with my brothers and sisters to the north at AM 950 Radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Best progressive talk. Please tune into these stations and more. I want you to meet my morning stars over here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, the Santita Jackson and Friends page, where we're streaming live. We're also streaming on WCPT 820. And of course, Jewel, bless her heart, always shares on my Instagram and Facebook, everybody, please, please. And on Twitter, at Santita J, at Santita J. And on LinkedIn, I'm all over the place, trying to get to more places. And I want to hear from you today. I want to talk to you about the suicide bombings in Kabul, in Afghanistan. I mean, what is going on? Can we get out of there quickly enough? And there are still Americans and Afghan allies who are still there. What do we do? What do we do? I want to know what you're thinking. We're going to have Malcolm Nance on to talk about this. And we're going to be talking about a tweet that he made just prior, well, several hours prior to this, you know, really talking about really the state of affairs on the ground there. And why we have to leave. And he's gotten into a lot of hot water about it. We're going to talk with him about that. at the bottom of the hour. He's going to stay with us throughout most of the show because we need to hear from him. We need to hear his side of it. We're not hearing enough of that. I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text voices today. What do you think about what's happening in Kabul? What do you think about what's happening in Afghanistan? What do you think about the president saying, hey, we will hunt you down? How's that going to work? Got to talk about that. And guess what, everybody? Paula. That's right. The India Watch, well, she has Dr. Jennifer Holden is a grandma. Yes, she sent me the pictures and she is gorgeous. Oh, I haven't posted them because I haven't gotten permission yet. But India is here, everybody. And let me see. She arrived at 7:23 p.m., 20 and a half inches long, 7 pounds, 14 ounces. She's a happy everybody. Welcome to the world, India. Please send Dr. Deb some love. Is this exciting? Well, you know, we've been waiting. She's like our baby. She's our baby. To everybody, God bless you. God bless you. India is here. Let me get you a couple of these headlines so we can get some good news from Pastor Tisha Williams. I don't know about you, but I sure do need it today. How about you? Oh, absolutely. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 87 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 76 degrees. A thunderstorm, a set of them that we're going to have today. The Dow closed down 192 points, but they've been breaking records. They've been having a record-breaking week and really, period. The NASDAQ closed down 96 points. The S&P 500 closed down 26 points. The Twins, well, they fell to the Red Sox. The Red Sox 12, the Twins 2. The White Sox are triumphant over the Blue Jays 10-7. And the Cubs and the White Sox will be playing each other this weekend. You know, we're going to have a crosstown series here in Chicago. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Well, wow, tragically, we lost 13 Marines and countless other people, 18. At least 140 people were injured in this suicide bombing in Kabul at the airport, where thousands of people gathered in recent days so that they could be evacuated from the country. Right after the explosions, gunmen opened fire on service members and civilians. At least 140 people were injured, including 18 service members. U.S. officials had warned that the chaotic and violent exit from Afghanistan could make the area vulnerable to renewed terrorist activity. And President Biden said the risk of an attack was one of the reasons he was adhering to the August 31st deadline. As you recall, the new government of Afghanistan, Taliban, told them August 31st is your red line. You must get out of here. And so who is behind this? A group known as ISIS-K. They claimed that this ISIS militant group carried out the suicide. We're going to ask Malcolm Nance about all of this. We need to know what is going on. What is the situation on the ground like now? The U.S. is pressing forward, according to this CNN report, with evacuations, including the roughly 1,000 persons still in Afghanistan, everybody. The Supreme Court has blocked the Biden administration's eviction moratorium, which was extended at the beginning of August to provide continued relief during the pandemic. Landlord groups balked at the extension, and the Supreme Court decided such a move would require new legislation. The White House said because of the ruling, families will face more evictions and more dangers from COVID. Everybody call your congressman in both houses, in the U.S. House of Representatives and in the U.S. Senate, 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. Tell them that you want to see some persons who are facing eviction. And you want relief for the landlords, too. A lot of middle-class people who have income-producing properties are being driven into homelessness. That's right. There's a lot going on, everybody. Tropical Florida is toward the U.S. Gulf Coast and could develop into a hurricane by the time it arrives. The system is now threatening the Caribbean with winds of 40 miles per hour. It will impact Cuba today, and it will be reaching the United States by Sunday, perhaps. Everybody, certainly residents in Louisiana, where the storm is forecast to hit, are preparing for potential rains and hurricane-force winds. The CDC issued a fresh health advisory yesterday, warning doctors and the public about the rapid increase in prescriptions for the antiparasitic drug ivermectin. Calls to poison control centers about the drug have increased threefold compared to the number of similar calls before the pandemic. We're going to have to ask about these different drugs that doctors have been prescribing. Doctors have been prescribing for the resolution of COVID-19. And we've been hearing a lot of things that have been promising, but the CDC is saying, no, they could be poisonous. We need to find out what's going on because certainly uh, there's got to be more than the vaccine, right? There's got to be more than the vaccine that can save us. Everybody, did you know that the Paralympics are happening? That's right. In Tokyo, everybody. And China has surged to the top of the medal table, everybody. That's right. Uh, it is just amazing what these athletes can do. You got to respect all athletes for their discipline, for their output. And China is at the top of the heap. Thus far, they have won more medals than anybody else. The United States, not even close. God bless them. Well, President Biden has warned we'll make you pay. I'm going to be talking with Malcolm Nance about that at the bottom of the hour. But right now, we are going to talk with Patricia Williams. Patricia Williams, how are you today? We've got to get some good news.
Good morning. I am well today. How are you?
Hey, girl, it's been a week, but you know what? I'm here. How about that? Albertina Walker, the queen of gospel music, has a song. I'm still here. And I thank God for that.
Still here.
I thank God for that.
Thank God for that. We thank God certainly for baby India. I'm certainly
Absolutely.
happy to hear that. I'm grateful to God for your parents
Thank you for that.
and for your entire family. So this morning, I want to do things a little differently with your permission. I feel compelled to do it just a little differently. I'd like to pray for us this morning.
Oh, yes.
I want to specifically pray for necessary endings. You know, as a lover of comic books, I can hardly stomach it when a superhero dies because in my mind, they're not supposed to. I feel the same way about Jesus. I feel like Jesus, for me, is my salvific superhero. And I often wonder when we look at his story why it had to end like that. If you were familiar with the movies a couple of years ago, fans flocked to the theater for the final installment of Marvel's Avengers. And before this, when we last met them, they were engaged in a battle of a lifetime with Thanos, a genocidal warlord. And at the conclusion of Infinity Wars, the Avengers were rendered helpless and out of control. And it was upsetting because that's not how the tales of our superheroes is supposed to end. The enemy is not supposed to prevail. The hero is supposed to save the day. And yet we were left with a cliffhanger. And on a Friday over 2,000 years ago, we were left with a crosshanger. When sin threatened to wipe out our population and condemn us to death, Jesus took one final stand in God's grand conclusion over 42 generations, arriving at Jesus' endgame. And while we know this is not the end of the story, it doesn't make the ending any less devastating. And we know that it was necessary. And so today I'd like to do things a little bit differently today and pray. I'm praying, Santita, for necessary endings, just for some things that need to end. In the book of the same name, Dr. Henry Cloud submits that our personal and professional lives can only improve to the degree that we see endings as a necessary and strategic step to something better. So before we hasten to what everybody's considering our new normal and our new lives, I want to look to God for the power and wisdom to end well the task, the obstacles, and everything that is set before us. So today, Lord, we thank you for another opportunity to come before your throne of grace. We thank you for life, health, and strength. Before we ask you for anything, we pause to say thank you for who you are and all you've done and all that you're going to do. We thank you for our sister Santita and this platform. We thank you for her visionary leadership and her obedience to you. And we pray for the complete healing of her parents, Reverend and Mrs. Jackson, and to be with their entire family. And I thank you for every person on this platform today. Someone under the sound of my voice needs this word. And as we consider necessary endings, we ask that you would reveal to us what needs to end and end well in all of our lives. We pray for the necessary endings of that which is not fruitful. You declared you were the true vine and your Father the vine dresser. So prune us where we are unfruitful. Help us to evaluate in this season what is a waste of our time and energy that we might better apply our gifts and talents to that which you called us to do. We pray for the necessary ending of that which is painful, this COVID-19 crisis, the ramifications of the earthquake in Haiti, the Afghan crisis. any and all things that are painful right now. We pray for the necessary ending. We pray for the necessary ending of that which is resentful. Remove unforgiveness in our hearts that we may move toward loving one another. End old wounds and past heart hurts that have stagnated our ability to step out and have paralyzed our progress. Help us to give grace because we've received your amazing grace. And let us not meter it out, but rather give it freely as you do. We pray for the necessary endings of that which is prideful. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We realize our need for you, and we recognize that we are spiritually helpless without you. We humbly depend on you and not ourselves. We pray for the necessary ending of that which is dreadful. The state of our world and the lack of human empathy at times is dreadful. Homelessness, racism, marginalization, police brutality is dreadful. Poverty is dreadful, but you are the God of the oppressed. You care for the poor, the widow, and the orphan. I pray today for the necessary ending of that which is doubtful. If there's any doubt in us, we ask that you remove it right now. We may doubt ourselves, but help us to have all confidence in your all sufficiency. We pray for the necessary endings of that which is careful. We come against the spirit of timidity right now. Help us to walk in holy boldness. Help us to walk in truth and in power. Command us as you did Joshua. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And we pray for the necessary ending of that which is shameful. You declare that you are sufficient in our weakness. So help us to be content with our weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when we are weak, we are strong. And we pray for the necessary ending of that which is done as usual. If this season has taught us anything, it's that doing things the way they've always been done is behind us and is no longer needful or necessary. We don't want to pray as usual or worship as usual or praise as usual or love as usual. Help us to be radical in what we do, that we might do things differently and boldly and change each other and change this world. And while we're praying for necessary endings, we look to hope with new beginnings. So grant us that which is powerful, grateful, successful, delightful, insightful, skillful, thoughtful, resourceful, and super powerful. Thank you, God, for this day. Thank you for your loving kindness. And thank you for helping us to know when things need to end and end well. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Thank you for that. I know that is something I needed to hear today, and I hope that it blessed all of you today, because that is the way life is. Every day has a beginning, every day has an end. Things start, things end, and we want them to end well. And certainly, we thank you for that. We thank you for that. Everybody, got to get her book. I see you, sis. I see you, sis. Get it. It's going to bless you. It's going to bless you. Stay right there because we're talking about with Dr. Shanita Knighton, scholar research scholar from Case Western Reserve University, registered nurse, infection preventionist. She does so much. You know, before we get to Malcolm Nance at the bottom of the hour, Dr. Knighton brought something to my attention, Pastor Williams, that I had not heard of. Mask mouth. You know, many of us just pick up these masks now, and I see people with some masks that are really, really unclean. And you don't know what someone's situation is. That might be the only mask they have access to, right? So you don't want to shame anybody. And a lot of us really don't know that there are protocols to masks, and they start inside of your mouth. Mouth. What is it?
So, mask mouth syndrome. Good morning. How
Good
are you?
morning. Wonderful hearing your voice.
Yes, yours too. So when we think about mask mouth syndrome, I will tell you that it is a problem that is on the rise. It's almost like how bedbugs just kind of showed up again out of the blue. So with mask mouth, it actually is caused by wearing a mask for a lot of time and keeping the mouth closed behind the mask or breathing more through your mouth than through your nose. What happens is it causes your mouth to dry out And as your mouth becomes more dry, your breath starts to smell and your teeth start to suffer. So essentially what happens is it could include dry mouth, bad breath, tooth decay. And it's common because most of us are not used to wearing a mask. And it's odd because you even have like these same issues that's even being experienced in the health community where they are not used to wearing personal protective equipment in between patient care, during patient care, after patient care, walking around with masks during their daily lives. And as a result of that, they're starting to become an increased cases of fungal infections, oral malodor, just as a result of starting to wear them. And so the goal is we do need to figure out a way to keep our mouth moist, meaning that we should drink more water to make sure that we're not being dehydrated. We should also make sure if you're not brushing your teeth as effectively or prioritizing it before and flossing, now would be the optimal time to be able to do so because we already know outside of false teeth, we only get one set of adult teeth. And so if those rot out, then that's a problem. But even more importantly, outside of appearance, you have appearance as being one factor, but you also have the risk for infections as being another. So just the same way as, COVID is a respiratory infectious disease, we have infectious disease that can also happen inside of the mouth. And some people are aware of that. Hence, they give, CHG for bacterial mouth infections if you're getting ready to go get a dental procedure done. Sometimes they use it as a preventative approach. Sometimes people have gum disease, so they have to make sure that they're killing off as much as the bad bacteria as they possibly can. And so it's important that if, again, you have not been taking care of your oral hygiene, that you're starting to, that you're drinking enough water throughout the day. And if you have issues already with dry mouth, there are, I'm drawing lozenges, that help with dry mouth. You have chewing gum, which helps to stimulate, the flow of saliva. So there's a numerous amount of things that can be done. This is what's called the unintended consequence of trying to prevent one problem. Sometimes it can lead to another, and this is where we have to be careful of. And we know this to be true. I'm definitely a spiritual person, and I be in my Bible, and we know that, sometimes too much of anything is considered to be greed. And in this situation, I'm just saying sometimes too much of something can be bad.
Well, I tell you what, Savannah said she's married to an ER nurse, and she said he's very type A about the mask, but she didn't know that it hurts your teeth, as she said. No one knew. No one knew. When she brought this to me, I said, what is this? Do you know anything about that?
I knew nothing about it. I am actually it. I'm like, wait, I'm sipping my water as
girl, pulling out all the flosses that you have. Okay, I did not know that this existed. Literally, I have about a minute before we have to go. Flossing, you said it should be a priority. Using mouthwash, is there any mouthwash that you would recommend? How often should we change out the mask? The last minute belongs to you.
So I will tell you, when it comes down to mouthwash and those types of things, I am sure that your dentist, if you have a dentist, they're aware of it. There's information also, too. If you use Colgate even provides information on their website in regards to mask mouth and being able to prevent it. So there are sources out there. This is not a matter of, let's say, us having to use particular brands over others. That's a whole different discussion.
No.
The biggest thing is when we're talking about mask hygiene, ensuring that if you are using disposable masks, you are reading the directions on the back of the mask. If the mask says only use it 4 hours, only use it 4 hours. If it says only 8 hours, only use it 8 hours. If it's telling you to store it in a cool, dry place, make sure that it's stored in a cool, dry place. If you have issues where you are a mouth breather, and I'm talking about even a mouth breather before COVID or just didn't know it, make sure that if your mask is becoming moist, if that requires you to have to change it out 2 to 3 times a day, then make sure that you are doing that. Do not think that with a cloth mask, if you look and say, oh, well, I'm going to wear this again tomorrow because this still look clean. It can look clean, but just because it looks clean does not mean that it can hold millions and millions of bad bacteria. You have to remember that the bacteria and the germs from the air and the bacteria and germs, other germs such as funguses from your mouth, they end up getting trapped inside of the barrier of the mask. And even though you can't see them, that then just becomes a potential vector or transmitter of germs, meaning your mask. That's why it's important that not only do you take care of your mask, change it out as often as you need to.
Absolutely.
But also making sure that you're just not sitting it down on every surface.
Dr. Shanina Knight, the infection, everybody should follow her on social media. She gives you information like this, like everybody's saying on my chat line now. OMG, I did not know this either. That's why she's here. A registered nurse, infection preventionist, the brilliant Dr. Shanina Knight, and of course the anointed Pastor Tisha Williams. Coming up, Malcolm Nance talking about Afghanistan and hashtag deal with it. What's going on, everybody? Back in just a minute. Woo! Dr. Knighton.
Wow.
Okay. All right. Yeah, exactly. That's why I said, no. You've got to talk about this today. Because this is something we do not even know. You don't even think about this. You don't even think about it. You don't. You didn't know that such a thing existed. Oh my gosh. And and
I guess.
no, please. Go.
I just had a question. I think I've always wondered what the long-term ramifications will be of this mask wearing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to hear this morning because that's one of the things I've always wondered. Like, what is the long-term effects of having to wear masks? So, wow.
Well, ladies.
And you know what?
I have. You guys go. Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to do it.
It's like give people the information so that way they can use it effectively. But the problem is like I've literally, like the way that we see the debates over the mask. Well, if you don't wear a mask, or else, it's put out here in such a negative light, or it's put out here, oh, just wear the mask. But just wearing the mask and just wearing the mask incorrectly can end us all up in a lot of trouble. And when we think about the equity issues that we have in our country and the fact that some people don't even have access to one, it brings up a different amount of issues. Like my heart breaks for our already vulnerable homeless population that's trying to be compliant with something that they're not even supplied with.
But we don't have infection preventionists in our face to tell us the information that you're giving us, because there are a lot of layers to this, right? We need to know that even with the mask, there are protocols that you need to follow. It's not as simple as just wearing a mask.
But I'll tell you that I've even discussed this with some colleagues, and they're like, well, if we tell people that, then that means that people are going to just not wear a mask. No, it doesn't. It means that they'll make sure, hey, if I want to stay safe from COVID, but I also don't want cavities or gum disease either. So I need to take these following steps. But that's the problem. Everybody is so fearful about what someone's not going to do without having the information, and that's why we're in this boat. When we need to share and be transparent about things.
That's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable.
I say I can't speak to it from the standpoint of being a dentist, but oral infections are real, and it's still up under the wheelhouse of infection prevention.
See, these are just things we don't know. These are things that we do not know. I mean, just very quickly, these cloth masks, the N95, are they one-time use, or can you wear them more than once?
N95s are only one-time use, the same way disposable masks are only one-time use. The public has to remember that emergency authorized use was giving, just so that way we can have enough PPE, but they are not safe in order to be able to wear more than once. In a healthcare facility, I can tell you right now, if I had a patient that had TB, I might have used that one.
We have Mr. Nance.
Thank you.
And then I disposed of it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let you guys go. I've got to come up with Malcolm Nance, but we'll be talking about this on Monday, because this is new. This is new information for the audience. Now you see why it's important to get her to our churches, Pastor Williams,
Oh, yes.
because that's where we are, you know.
15.
So sending you both much, 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 much love. Malcolm Nance, it's wonderful hearing your voice this morning.
Much love to you.
Oh, much love. And thank you for your prayers for my parents. I appreciate that. And for everybody, everybody.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
More of the Santita Jackson Show. Welcome to WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And my morning stars are on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. And you're on my YouTube channel as well, the Santita Jackson Show. Please like and subscribe there. And please like and share this conversation that we're having on the Santita Jackson and Friends page and on WCPT 820 on that Facebook page as well. At Santita J, on Twitter and on LinkedIn and on Instagram, Santita Jackson IG. Let's talk about Kabul, this unfolding tragedy where at least 140 people were injured. More than a score of our service persons were killed. What happened? How did that happen? And why is it that there was a CNN reporter this morning, maybe in the 4 o'clock hour, certainly 4 o'clock Central? He said, this is something that has happened many times down through the years in Afghanistan, this suicide bombing. And yet it seems that this brilliant intelligence professional, intelligence expert, New York Times bestselling author of the plot to destroy America, and many others, his veteran, indeed his family, have served in our military since the Civil War. He got into a little bit of difficulty yesterday as he talked about it, as he really outlined why we're being hastened out of that country. Malcolm Nance, part of the Santita Jackson Show family, we're so glad that you're with us. I'm claiming you over here, Malcolm Nance. That's that. So that's the end of that. Sorry, you're stuck with us, and there's nothing about it. You can call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278, 773-763. WCPT. Want to know what your thoughts are about the evacuation? Do you think that the president's doing it correctly? If you notice, it is the European nations who are being ushered out very, very quickly. China's still there. Russia's still there. What's going on, everybody? In the meantime, Malcolm Nance, you had a tweet yesterday. 20 years. There have been suicide bombers killing civilians nearly daily in Afghanistan. This ain't new. It's why we're leaving. Hashtag deal with it. And there was a CNN reporter in the 4 o'clock hour Central Standard Time who said the same thing. He said, by the way, he just said it routinely, just tossed it off. This sort of thing happens all the time in Afghanistan. Help me. What are we looking at, and why was what you said so controversial?
Well, let's put it into perspective. Okay, first, we've been in Afghanistan for 20 years. And a lot of times the Afghan war was referred to as Forgotten Stan, or, the Forgotten War. And that's true. When I went into Afghanistan was very, very early in the war. In fact, just a week or so after we thought we had driven Osama bin Laden and his forces into the Tora Bora Mountains and had pretty much eliminated al-Qaeda. And that was when the war was so new and was quickly overshadowed by the run-up to the Iraq War in 2003. So for years, Afghanistan was really a backwater, a forgotten war, even though U.S. service members were dying there with alarming regularity. And one of the things that I think that Afghanistan has truly identified for our country is that we don't value the military as much as we say we do, and we tend to forget the efforts and sacrifices of the people who are actually representing us on the other side of the world and trying to keep us as safe as humanly possible. That being said, we do forget things that happen to us, even major incidents that happened 2 weeks before every crisis that we find ourselves in. And one of the problems that we had, not just with Afghanistan, but Iraq and Libya and Syria and Somalia and Yemen, all of these places that the global war on terrorism was being fought, is that we would have these fantastical incidents. And I think that because so few people truly serve in the military, have members in the military, they don't really understand what sacrifice is. My family has served in the armed forces continuously. There has been a Nance in the armed forces since April 1864. My niece is just retiring from the Navy and is the last one thus far in the Nance line. That's over 150 years of continuous military service. And, you know, we don't go out and look for praise. This is a relatively thankless job. It's only recently that Americans have been able to enunciate that they appreciate what the men and women in the armed forces do for the country. But we do in the United States have a tendency to forget where we've been, what we've done, and sometimes what the strategic goals are when incidents happen at a tactical level. The strategic goal of Afghanistan was to crush al-Qaeda. It was to disassemble the support base of the Taliban. That was done quickly. Then those goals shifted to essentially stabilizing Afghanistan until we could get to the point where we could get out. And then it completely re-geared to moving to Iraq and re-engineering the entire shape of the Middle East so that it could be sort of a lily pad, launching space for U.S. forces in the future. That was the neoconservative image. And now, after 20 years of nonstop combat, we are withdrawing from Afghanistan at the cost of 2,000, I believe the number 793 of our men and women. I'll check that number. That might not be right, but it's pretty close, 2,700 men and women in the armed forces who have lost their lives in Afghanistan. And you can add to that the 4,900 we lost in Iraq. So in avenging 9/11, we have lost in members of the armed forces almost 8,000 of our men and women. And one of the things that we do is we do these operations, like in Afghanistan, this non-combatant evacuation operation. We do that with almost alarming regularity, just not on this scale. I took part in 4 of what we call NEOs, evacuations of American citizens from Somalia, Liberia, Rwanda, Albania, Bosnia. These things occur, and they are either permissive, where the environment is easy for us to get in, fly in, extract American citizens, and get out, or they are semi-permissive, where the environment is dangerous and we are cautious with weapons forward, or they are non-permissive, where we have to fly in, fight our way in, extract our citizens, and fly out. This operation in Afghanistan is technically been a drawdown and a withdrawal that's been 20 years in coming. And it was only this year that President Biden decided to execute Donald Trump's pretty horrible Taliban peace deal with our enemy, the Taliban, in order to get us completely out of Afghanistan. But in doing that, it was always going to be fraught with danger. Now, top secret story time. I am a Navy Chief Petty Officer. My job is to be the hard deck reality of what comes, could come, and may come when it comes to the defense of the people that I work with, or it comes to the operations of the systems that I have in order to collect intelligence and provide that warning that the people around me need in order to defend ourselves and combat our enemies. I do not pull punches. You know, and I may have been a little harsh in that tweet. And I'll tell you, I deleted it and I apologize. But let me tell you this. No one understands the way those families feel more than I do. I have been throughout my 20-year career and more, my civilian intelligence career. My first incident when I arrived in Beirut, Lebanon in 1983 was 24 hours after I arrived. 69 people were killed at the American embassy in Beirut, including all of U.S. intelligence assets that were in the embassy by a suicide bomber. Within 3 more months, we would be struck again, and 243 sailors and Marines would be killed by a suicide bomber in Beirut. And I was just 19 years old. That's over 300 of our citizens and allies who were worked with us killed in 2 suicide bombings. That was the beginning of a very horrible, long career of dealing with these types of attacks. We have been dealing with the terrorist threat for decades now. And in the sailors, Marines, airmen, guardians, and who went to Kabul airport are there to protect with their own lives the men and women of our country, our allies, and those who want to leave the oppression of what they believe is a coming Taliban brutal takeover of government. And we willingly do that. We don't mind risking our lives. We know what the stakes are. It's our families that have to bear this burden.
Of course.
My mother had 7 members in the armed forces at one time. My wife had to put up with all of my horrible deployment. And now today we have grieving families in America for the Marines that we lost. But we also lost our Afghan brothers and sisters who we were there to protect. This attack was going to be coming. ISIS Khorasan is a horrible terrorist group that even the Taliban is fighting. All right? The Taliban could not stop them. It's the nature of terrorists. What we can do is do this mission as quickly as possible, as best as possible, bring our citizens home, get our citizens out, and then manage this problem from afar.
We're talking with intelligence expert Malcolm Nance, New York Times bestselling author. You've got to get his latest book, The Plot to Betray America. Indeed, his memoir will be out next year, so we can hear about his stories. I don't know if we've ever heard from a Black man in our American experience who has been a spy. That is what he does. He does intelligence. And so, and I just want to know from you, let me get the order on this tweet, because I didn't realize how controversial it was, because I know you, and I know you to be someone who's deeply compassionate, and you not only care about your fellow brothers and sisters in the military, you care about the people you protect, you even care about your enemies. That having been said, you tweeted this out many hours before this bombing, yes?
Oh, well, at first blush, I don't think there was even a report of injuries. It was 6 or 7 hours later that the Defense Department found out or announced that there were American casualties.
Okay, so
but I'm not particularly interested in the discussion around the tweet. That's like I said, it was harsh, and I deleted it, and I have since made it eminently clear, because I've been around these things. In Baghdad, I survived 3 suicide bombings within the blast radius of each. I was at the Pentagon attack. I saw an airplane blow up on the morning of 9/11, and I worked the crash site as a first responder there the whole time. This is almost a career, hazard in counterterrorism these days. The real thing that we need to be discussing this morning is who are we as a nation? Because it's not so much that we're having these incidents. these incidents occur. It's how we respond as a country. And I've noticed that there's this dichotomy, this almost schizophrenic split every time we have these incidents. And they go one of two ways. First is the rending and the bereavement, which is right and fair and just. And then there's the hatred, the horrible, horrible hatred. I saw some, put aside the things that were said about me. I mean, I got 25 death threats yesterday, and I can't tell you how many times I was called the N-word. It's some of the way that they suddenly decide that, entire swaths of the nation are no longer trustworthy citizens and almost, should be considered in the same category as our enemies. Another component that is, and it's almost like the lesson of Afghanistan has been lost, this bloodlust to want to mass murder innocent civilians. We were in Afghanistan for 20 years. 20 years. We lost thousands of service members. We dropped hundreds of thousands of bombs. Okay? War cannot be won with just hatred in your heart. You have to have a goal, you have to have allies, and you have to have a moral sense of honor in what you're doing, right? And the mission that was being performed at Kabul International Airport was a mission of honor, was a protective shield around our citizens and our allies. And that's the risk we take. It's sometimes we pay a price. And that price is we should cherish. But you can't do that by going out and destroying the moment of honor, by sullying the people who serve this nation. For every person that called me an N-word yesterday, and they were many, calling my phone, blasting up, there are members who have lost their lives who are African American or people of color or people who, we are brothers in the armed forces. We are. I take care of the guy or the man or the woman to my left or my right because they are with me. We are one. We are Americans. And we don't care what your confession is. We don't care how you worship, what your politics are. I am very, very jealous of the name American when I am overseas. I guard it and I honor it no matter who you are. But now I think we're at a point in American history where there is a mortal fracture in not just our personal values, Santita, but the way we look at each other. And I don't think we've had this fracture since 1860. And I don't like it because now I have to evaluate sometimes my fellow citizens as a threat on par with ISIS. And we've seen terrorist attacks. We've seen people threaten to murder our politicians or to kill our fellow citizens over things that are not even occurring in America. And that breaks my heart because I swore every moment of my life to this flag. I swore I'm a Philadelphian. I am a true originalist in the American experiment. I love the American experiment. I get offended when people say, you're not an American or because you're black, you can't understand what we're coming from and this is our country. Hey, we are all one country.
Well, it's
George
also
Washington's first. Just one more point. George Washington's first tomb of the unknown soldier is buried on a black cemetery behind Independence Hall. We are all as one.
Well, it's also very insulting as Black people who have been here since the beginning to be tarnished in that way, if you will. And the only reason I brought up this tweet, which you have deleted, and you've apologized for anyone you've hurt, and you've asked people to charge it to your head and not to your heart. I think the background information that you've given us, Malcolm Nance, has given us context for this tweet, because I don't think that you were being unkind. That's just my read on it. It's the truth. The truth is harsh, but It's an occupation that has, and these people have felt that they have been at war with the United States and other European powers. They feel violated. And I think that we need to have an understanding of that, Malcolm Nance. You understand these things when you get on the ground. You are an Arabic speaker. You understand the cultures that you are seeing, and you're open to them. And so, um, because you followed this up with tweets, talking about, enumerating the numbers of our soldiers we have lost. And behind those soldiers are families. They're people who love them. And then these soldiers get overseas and they see that the mission is not what they thought it was or what they were told it was. And that breeds mistrust and anger and on and on and on and on. So I felt that it was very important that you explain this today and help us to understand the context in which our men and women have been deployed. Because the narrative is off, Malcolm Nance. I mean, what Julian Assange has said and what other people have said is, you know what? There was a lot of profit in this. And so this has not been quite what we thought it was. Help us to get on the same page on this. I mean, are we going to be able to get everybody out? I mean, where are we going from here? I've got about 3 minutes.
Sure. Let me make this pretty clear. We are going to get as many people out as we humanly can. The embassy did not have track on every individual that came into Afghanistan. Many of them are dual citizens. Many of them didn't notify the embassy. So we're going to have to work the mission as hard as we can. There will be resources to get Americans out after the deadline. But, we still have to take out 6,000 service members and get them out as safely as possible. And then we're going to have to use our leverage within government and within State Department and with the Taliban to see about the rest. But this evacuation, this reverse Berlin airlift, is pretty miraculous. And it's what we in the armed forces do, my brothers and sisters in the armed forces. We do this, we do it well, but it's never clean. And if it ever was, we would never have wars. And as Sherman said, war is hell.
Well, Shanina Knighton, she was just here. She said, thank you. So many need to hear your message. So many people are so grateful for you today because they want to know what you tweeted. They want to know what the big deal is. Carol Crowley says, God bless this man. And you are getting a lot of love here today. And I want to know what you're thinking, everybody.
Can I make one quick
Of course.
point?
The final 2 minutes in this segment belong to you.
ISIS does not care about Twitter. The Taliban do not care about Twitter. Suicide bombers do not care about Twitter. Cleanse your mind of our own egos and start thinking about what we are doing. And our mission is to save as many people as possible. And when that mission is done, then you can go back and you can retrospective this. But, we have children being born in America now that just flew overseas. And we have people who are now going to become productive American citizens after all of this debacle, this 20-year war is over. But it might be time for us to think outside of our 216 character selves and start thinking with our hearts about who we are and what our values are. And that's all we should be thinking about today.
Everybody, I want you to respond to what you're thinking, and what you've heard from Malcolm Nance. He's going to stay with us today, so we want to talk about this. We need to look at why we were there, why we're leaving, what's going on, and where do we go from here. I mean, no one is talking in mainstream media about the 6,000 troops you said who are still there. We're hearing about the 1,000+ Americans who are still there, and they're all important. Every life is important. But we want the troops out too. We want them to get home, and we want them to get home safely. We do. So we need to know what's going on here. I mean, and Malcolm Nance, stay right here, because we need to talk this through today, everybody. We really do. We need to get on the same page. We're not on the same page, which is why we're attacking each other, which is why he's being called out of his name. He's being called the N-word, having given so much worthy service. How does that work? And what was misinterpreted here? Got a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show. I want to hear from you at 773 763-9278, 773-763. WCPT. I'm coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station based here in Chicago, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Meet me on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Everybody like and share, like and share. Stay with WCPT and AM 950 radio throughout the day for the best progressive talk. 15. More of the Santita Jackson Show with Malcolm Nance and a few other friends 10. In just a few minutes, back on WCPT and AM 950 radio. Wow. Wow. Gene Williams says the brother protecting.
We're going to answer questions?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm going to bring on Dwight McKee, told you some people who I think who are supportive of you. And I think that we just have to get on the same page here. I was about to call you pastor. Yeah. Not quite, I'm around a lot of pastors. You know that. You know that. But I felt that it was important for people for those who hadn't heard about your tweet, because several people here had not. They needed to hear that, needed to understand that you deleted it. But the context is something, quite frankly, most of my audience, they don't take umbrage with it. We have Chip Gibbons. Okay, Chip Gibbons. Oh, my goodness. How are you, Chip Gibbons?
I'm well. How about you? Are you holding up?
Okay. You are. My parents. Thank you so much for asking. Malcolm. Both of my parents have COVID, and they are hospitalized as we speak. And bless their hearts, they are coming along. And I want to thank you all for your prayers and your thoughts and your well wishes. It's been a challenging week for me and for my family, but thank goodness they have had access to the best of health care. And fortunately, they're responding to treatment. And so thank you so much for that. Thank you for asking. Really. We've been very, very blessed. But it's been a tough week. Because COVID is no joke. It's an up and down kind of thing. It really is. But we're here. And dealing with something, right? So, Mr. McKee, we must continue to move forward. But thank you so much for that. And of course, you're with Malcolm Nance, the U.S. intelligence expert, New York Times bestselling author, MSNBC commentator, and he's been helping to guide us through, really, literally on the ground, what's happening in Afghanistan. I mean, what's painful is obviously this suicide bombing. I mean, as we're on our way out, we've got servicemen. I don't know if there was a woman among them, but you have our service persons who've been killed. They're not going to get home. And we have Attorney Patillo. Got a lot of people with some broken hearts today. Remember that. And you've got a lot of Afghanistani people who have broken hearts today. Let us be mindful of that. So joining you, Malcolm Nance, we've got Dwight McKee. He's one of the founding board members of Operation Push, which became Rainbow Push. Of course, he's with the National Action Network now, and he runs a brilliant program helping to heal and build our young people on the west side of Chicago. In fact, Steve Jobs' wife she produced a documentary about the work that he and Reverend Dr. Marshall Hatch are doing on the west side. And we've got Chip Gibbons defending rights and dissent. He's going to help us to really understand really where, you have Daniel Hale, you have Julian Assange, you have a lot of people who really tried to sound the alarm about Afghanistan down through the years, and they have been muted. Attorney Robert Patillo, brilliant radio host. He is the Southeastern Regional Director of Rainbow Push, based in Atlanta, but WAOK Radio in Atlanta is that show every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time, 12 to 3 Central Standard Time. You don't want to miss it. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning, Santita.
Good morning. I think I need some water. Goodness gracious. There's a whole lot to say. But Malcolm Nance here, and everyone has so much respect and appreciation for you, Malcolm Nance, and we just thank you for sharing your time with us today.
My pleasure.
And we're so excited. But a lot of people do want to talk to you, and a lot of people are making a lot of comments. So, do you think you'd ever run for office, Malcolm?
And Basil Smikle, who is the head of the New York Democratic Party at one point, met me me in a green room, and he said, in your district, he said, would you ever consider running for Congress in the district that you live in? And I said, I'd consider it. And so later I ran into Tom Perez, and Tom Perez mentioned this to me. And he said, finally, you know, you have a bigger mouthpiece. You don't want to just go back to being one of 500 people who no one would ever hear from again. And I thought about that, and I said, you know, it might be true, but, you know, you can never say never, but I think I have a higher calling.
Yeah, I think, you know, we all want, I can't wait for you to do even more on the media platforms. Not like I need to give you another set of jobs, but I'm looking forward to all the things that you're going to be doing. Because, you know, when you come on television, when you point something out, when you write a book, we listen. We listen because we trust your information.
Yeah.
That's very important, and that's very challenging in these times. I think Dwight and Chip and Robert would agree. And part of the challenge you have now is that you don't trust the people who are telling you, who are giving you any information, which is that puts us at crisis in the United States and in the world today, but particularly in America, particularly here. Fake news and all of that. That's very real, very real. So we're going to be in very, very shortly. And it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. Every day it's a lot. Something. Let me get this. And of course, Malcolm, I want you to react to President Biden saying that we will make you pay. And I need you to do that. Well, I need you to react. How about that? That made me wince.
1 minute.
Stand by, everybody. And of course, I'm going to ask everybody else to react to it. But it did make me wince. Okay, all right. So everybody continue to call in at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. But I will also be reading your comments because I know you all want to be heard on air, and I'm going to make sure that you are heard. Okay? All right. Mehdi said, I'm saddened by the deaths of Americans in Afghanistan after yesterday's bombing and those 8,000 soldiers who died previously. It's a lot. And they keep coming up with these groups, ISIS B, ISIS K. Goodness gracious. Look, it's too much for me. I'm overwhelmed with the information. Stand by, everybody.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT, or 9278. Let's talk about Kabul, these suicide attacks that killed so many of our men and women on the ground, our service persons in uniform. What happened? How did that happen? And indeed, we're just a few days ahead of the August 31st deadline, but it seems like we are trying to get out of there as quickly as we can. What's going on? Cesar says, you know, we are not withdrawing. America got defeated. Is that true? What do you think? I want to hear from you. We've been talking with the brilliant and the courageous veteran Malcolm Nance, U.S. intelligence expert, New York Times bestselling author, The Plot to Betray America. Indeed, his memoir will be coming out next year. We're talking with him about what we should be looking at on the ground and, what's going to happen next? And, of course, Dwight McKee, social scientist, is joining us. Chip Gibbons from Defending Rights and Dissent. Indeed, he's their policy director, and the Southeastern Regional Director of Rainbow Push, Robert Patillo, who is also the host of his own radio show on WAOK. A brilliant host every Sunday from 12 to 3 Central Standard Time, 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. Let's get to some of these headlines so that we can get to our panel today. In Chicago, we will have a high of 87 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 76 degrees, thunderstorms. The Dow closed down 192 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 96 points. The S&P 500 closed down 26 points. Major League Baseball, the Twins, well, they fell to the Red Sox 12-2. The White Sox are triumphant over the Blue Jays 10-7. And this weekend in Chicago, we'll be having our crosstown series with the White Sox and the Cubs. Everybody, did you know about the Paralympics? Well, they're taking place in Tokyo as we speak, and China is sitting atop the heap. They have won more medals than anyone. Congratulations to all of those courageous, fantastic athletes who are having the Paralympics in Tokyo as we speak. Let's get right to today's story, everybody. 13 U.S. service members and at least 90 Afghan citizens were killed in a pair of bombing attacks outside the airport in Kabul, according to this CNN report, where thousands of people had gathered in recent days to escape Taliban rule. Right after the explosions, gunmen opened fire on service members and civilians. At least 140 people were injured in the attack, including 18 U.S. service members. U.S. officials had warned that the chaotic and violent exit from Afghanistan could make the area vulnerable to renewed terrorist activity. Right now, we are seeing ISIS-K has taken responsibility for this. Who are they? Could this exit have been done, or could it be done more peacefully? What are we looking at, everybody? And how can we get everybody out of there? Did you know that there are thousands of service members in the American service members who are still on the ground? Thousands, thousands. We're looking for 1,000 plus Americans, but there are thousands of our men and women who are on the ground there. How are they going to get home? Call me, text me at 773-763-WCPT. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text, but I want to hear your voices today. We're going to start with you, Malcolm Nance. What are we looking at? What happened yesterday, Malcolm Nance?
Well, again, what we saw was a terrorist attack that was carried out by a group called ISIS Khorasan. That's with a K. Khorasan is how they pronounce it. And the ISIS-K organization is a microscopic terrorist group that is an offshoot of ISIS Caliphate out of Syria and Iraq. Now, that group, of course, has been pretty much decimated, but there are sub-organizations that have existed for the past 5 years. ISIS Khorasan is a group that believed that the Taliban were not motivated enough, were not hardcore enough jihadis to take on the West. They have very, very different goals from the Taliban. The Taliban are Pashtun people who generally who come from eastern Afghanistan and western Pakistan, and they are trying to establish a culturally religious, tribal state based on their variation of Islam. ISIS Khorasan are a conglomerate of some ex-Taliban people, some Pakistani hardcore jihadis, and Arab jihadis who left the Al-Qaeda organization, who believe that anyone who is not part of their group, Muslim or not, is an infidel and worthy and subject to death and subjugation. ISIS and the Taliban actually clash from time to time, but ISIS is such a small group, ISIS-K. They infiltrate suicide bombers into areas through Taliban areas and into the central government areas when the government existed, and would carry out suicide attacks that had nothing to do with the Taliban's objectives of, creating an Islamic state there. These are two entirely different entities. And now ISIS-K has proven to be a Taliban problem. Because this time, according to the Taliban, as far as you can believe them, they are trying to create their own Islamic emirate in which they would run this country the way with a less brutal hand than they did in 2001. They don't want to be North Korea of South Asia. And ISIS-K has just made that much more difficult by attacking us on the way out. But this is ISIS's stated goal, which is to carry out acts of terrorism against the West. And the Taliban be danged, they did just that.
What about the president saying that vowing revenge? Did that help as we still have people on the ground and we will make you pay?
it's hard to do strike operations without having someone on the ground or gaining sources that are going to give you that intelligence. You can only see so much from the air. You can only see so much from space. You do have to confirm where you're going, what you're striking. You just can't lash out. So we're going to have to develop new intelligence sources because most of those have dried up because we've left the country. U.S. military bases are gone, CIA substations and stations are gone. We may have to rely on our, semi-reliable allies in Pakistani intelligence. But, when we've clashed with ISIS-K in the past, some of our intelligence has come from the Taliban itself. It is not in their interest to have this group slaughtering Afghan citizens because they targeted the Americans, but they really needed the devastation of mass murdering Afghan citizens to achieve their goals. And that's their goal. Remember, they don't care who is a Muslim, who is a good Muslim, who is a bad Muslim. In their crazy cultish world, if you are not part of their group, then you're worthy of being killed. So, that being their objective, they are going to continue to lash out so long as we're there. And they're going to lash out at any foreign interest in that country, so long as they are, from the West or of the West, and ISIS can maintain its viability by doing these attacks.
Malcolm, is it a cultish world or is it a tribal world? Which is it, or is there a difference?
Well, first off, let's segregate ISIS and ISIS-K and the Taliban. The Taliban is purely a tribal organization. That part of the world are tribal in the most fundamental sense. I mean, Genghis Khan had trouble with them. Alexander the Great had trouble with them. The British have fought 3 Anglo-Afghan wars, including this current one. The Soviet Union was defeated by them. They are tribes. That is not what we're talking about with ISIS-Khorasan, ISIS-K. They are a terrorist group, and they are a sort of rogue melange of individuals who are following a terrorist ideology. But the Taliban, they are a tribal organization with links to all of the major tribes in Afghanistan, which is how they took power so quickly. The tribes cut deals with them and essentially handed the keys to the Taliban. ISIS has no such structures to hold them back. But that will work against ISIS because now the Taliban can enlist the tribes to isolate ISIS, their base camps, find intelligence about them, and in fact, maybe take action against them.
What are you thinking, everybody? Robert Patillo, your response. How do you respond to all of this and what happened yesterday as we're supposed to be on our way out?
I think I had the same feeling that many people had, which was just profound disappointment that we were so close to exiting and also seeing what inevitably will happen next. The Republican Party was already calling for bloodlust based on the exit that we were having from Afghanistan. And in many ways, it seems as if they have finally forced President Biden's hand to attack and maybe even redeploy to the region. America has gone to war for far more flimsy reasons than the killing of 13 U.S. service members. You can look at the Gulf of Tonkin. You can look at the bombing of the USS Maine. You can look at the original Afghanistan war. For examples of the flimsy Cassia Belli, which have been used in the past. And the fact that we were, less than a week from being out of the country and now almost seeing inevitably that once we get our people out, we will probably be seeing at least airstrikes, if not the redeployment of troops to the region. I think it's profoundly disappointing for the people who have protested this war since they were in high school, like I have, for the people who have family members serve there. And the concept of ever having peace in that region, so much so that even the Taliban today is claiming they want to help in tracking down the ISIS-K members who perpetrated and promoted this attack. But at the end of the day, the American people do not seem fine gradations when it comes to foreign policy. They see brown people, and then they see people who need to catch some bombs from these defense contractors, and that's what we're going to see happening very soon. And I'm just profoundly disappointed that we seem in America to never be able to get out of wars, and it seems that this war, even as we're on our way out the door, will be continuing.
I mean, Malcolm, because there are a lot of different perceptions here, right? And, I just heard someone on my colleague Tom Hartman's program, and he was saying, actually the Afghan people, when they come to the United States, they'll be white. I said, well, everybody can be white but black people, but that is not how they see themselves in the rest of the world. Can you speak to that?
I think as African Americans, let me speak from our perspective. This is one of the few things that we really need to tamp down when we hear this in public. I know I do it in my own barbershop, right? At the center of the African American male universe. Every once in a while, you hear crazy things that I have to educate people on. We are a nation of immigrants. I like to say that. And there are two categories of people who are not the immigrants to this country. First, the natives who were here before us, whose land was, expropriated from them. And then African American ancestors who came as hostages, technically. So we were forced here. That's not immigration. But everyone else who came after us were immigrants to this country. And it's despite the flaws of our founding fathers, many of whom were slaveholders, many of whom were having intimate relations with their African American slaves, were also men of the Enlightenment who could see that our future steps and our children and our children's children would be the ones to make the incremental change in how people are perceived. Here's one we need to correct. These people are people of color. Yes, they come from South Asia, Southwest Asia, emphasis on Asia. And they are people who came with their own lives and are now coming here with nothing. And they will help make the American dream better. And how we in our community, of all communities, can exercise a fundamental prejudice towards anyone that comes here to better their lives, because we've tried, we still struggle with that, is actually something, again, we all need to correct when we hear it, okay? It's not about black and white. It's about people and giving those people, they're coming for their shot at opportunity. We've been here for well over 4 centuries. And we are still trying to perfect the American experiment.
I think that you're right. I would take umbrage with this. We are the only people who can't become white. A generation or two in, other people come to the United States, and even the indigenous people become white, and that becomes problematic. You know what I'm saying, Malcolm? It just becomes problematic.
Well, you can't say that to most Muslim people.
Oh, I gotcha.
In this country. I mean, I brought my Iraqi interpreters over and my guards from Iraq on the SIV program. Fortunately, the people I knew in Afghanistan got out early. I don't think that's necessarily true, and I don't think it's necessarily helpful for us. My great grandmother was redheaded and almost purely white with freckles.
Mm-hmm.
So, we span a range too. She was considered white for most of her life. So I don't think that it helps the conversation to even have that talk. I like to tamp that down and say, hey, what are we going to do to better the American experiment? Are we going to harness our own better angels, or are we just going to sit here and whinge and become part of the problem?
Well, I think we can do both, quite frankly. I think we can do both, because I think that we have got to deal with white racism and how it impacts all of us, and how many of us, how we're all aspirationally white. It gets you out of this thing. But it's, it's just a thought. It's just a thought, but it's certainly one that I have, because, it's just, because You can be white Hispanic or black Hispanic. You can't be white black. Even with my relatives, who were many of whom on my father's side were mostly white people. They were either they passed or they just took the hit as black people. But it's something for, I think it's important for us to have the discussion in a respectful way, And let me address this before I bring you on, Dwight McKee and Chip Gibbons. Cesar, I've noticed you over the past few days, and I certainly appreciate your coming on our chat line and talking and contributing. That's very, very important. And we certainly do not mind people who have different views, different from everyone's here, because no one is singing from, is singing the same from the same sheet of music. Or we're singing from the same sheet of music, we just have different parts. But we do respectfully dissent. So I would ask you not to attack anyone on this thread, or you can absent yourself from this thread. And I mean that for anyone. I don't want to have anyone disrespected or diminished here. That is unacceptable. Okay? But my brother, I'm glad that you're here. But there are rules of engagement here, and those are they. Dwight McKee, your thoughts about what happened yesterday?
I want to kind of stay right in the point that we were having to discuss, that you all were just discussing, what I talked about yesterday, is Du Bois wrote a book called The Souls of Black Folk. Not the soul of black folk, the souls of black folk. And what he was saying is that the contradictions between the ideals of America and the reality of America creates a kind of bipolarity in a black person in America, because you are swept somewhere between the nobleness of the idealists and the decadence of the reality. And so a guy like Dr. King just wasn't progressive. He was prophetic. But when he was prophetic, the prophecy in Dr. King ran him headlong into the diminished values of America. And so whereas he should have been a hero and exalted, he became a villain and assassinated. It's almost like you have to choose between two realities. The truth of Christ and the evil of Satan, and who you're going to be and what side of that fence you're going to fall on. That's almost what I'm hearing today, is that it seems to be part of Malcolm, you're hearing this part is Malcolm Nance and part Malcolm X, because he sees now a truth that he's committed to, that he must express, and yet the backlash to him speaking the truth has made him now the villain rather than the hero. For us who try to come out of the prophetic tradition, it's kind of normal with us, because we know that we have to choose truth to come rushing in like a mighty stream. And we know we're going to historically get swept up in the backlash, but yet the calling of Christ and the role of a Christian forces you to go in the direction. I'm too troubled about what I saw yesterday with the people getting killed and the soldiers getting killed. I'm deeply troubled, but yet I also understand that we had invaded somebody else's country. And they saw us as real enemies and real invaders. And we killed a lot of them for reasons we never could articulate. And so if people as George Washington run the British out because they see them as invaders and we see them as Lance just said, the founding fathers, then if you impose those values in Afghanistan, the Taliban and ISIS and that crowd sees themselves as the saviors of the countries of that country and the founding fathers.
1 minute.
we have to stop putting so much value on America as being such a special country who can say no wrong and do no wrong, and give other people legitimacy as having legitimate values, legitimate countries, legitimate governments, and even if they disagree with us, legitimate religions. Otherwise, we would keep running into these wars, and more wars.
And my challenge, I mean, and Dr. King said that this could happen. The wars will come home in ways that we cannot imagine. So let's talk about this today. Chip Gibbons, cannot wait to hear from you because you've had a lot of dissenters who have been silenced, or should I say truth tellers who've been silenced. Part of the challenge we have right now is that we don't have the same narrative. And we need to get a truthful one, starting with Malcolm Nance and this wonderful panel. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a few minutes. Okay, you guys, this is a whole lot. This is a whole lot. It really is. It's just a lot. Because Malcolm, I have to tell you, when I read your tweet, I didn't think you were being mean. I really didn't. That's why, when you told me this yesterday, I was like, I didn't get it.
It was the next one where, I usually get a bunch of death threats a year, but it's usually after a Tucker Carlson or a Laura Ingraham hit.
Okay.
And this one, you have all these, hidden anonymous heroes who are, threatening your family and calling you N-word all over the place. I mean, just an explosion of it. And I just said, okay, that's enough. That's why I put out that second tweet saying you're dishonoring the deaths of 2,743 people who died in Afghanistan by going out and attacking someone with the N-word, right? Wanting to kill them.
Is this why you said, here's why I'm going to delete this tweet? Because I have the series of them right here.
No, there was a tweet in between that.
Okay.
that said that. And let me see if I can find it on my phone. But oh yeah, I deleted it. So but people are funny now because it's all politics. There's no normal.
This is crazy. I mean, I'm telling you, I just saw it and I was like, okay, I don't understand why.
Here it is.
Okay, please tell me. Help us.
It says, Afghanistan, we have lost 4 of our service members. This is when it was only 4, right? The reality this is terrible. The cost could be greater if we didn't complete the mission. For the racist assholes who are writing and calling me nigger, you disgrace their loss and our other 2,372 of our brothers and sisters. That's not the one that got NBC mad, though. It was the deal with it one.
Well, which one? FYI, 20 years. FYI, there have been terrorist suicide bombers killing civilians nearly daily in Afghanistan. This ain't new. It's why we are leaving. Deal with it. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
that's the one. Well, it's because Fox News wrote an article about it. And all the right-wingers and, Ben Shapiro, all those guys are screaming about that. That was the most horrible thing that happened yesterday.
Yeah, but they should have had their people writing about it, too. That's what's offensive to me. And it's disingenuous, too.
This is what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry.
It's disingenuous, but it's I'm the only black in national security, Santita. Their job is to tear me down. Full-time job.
Well, that's why you need your own, I told you need your own platform where you say what you need to say. You don't need a filter.
I'm all over that today.
Okay, you don't need a filter. This is ridiculous.
I'm all about that.
I guess I'm just trying. Dwight, did you, Chip, Robert, did you hear anything wrong in that? I mean, I'm like, hey, it's just saying this is what has happened there.
I'm off as a little jealous.
It's back to the point that America always makes, which is we report about the 13 Americans who died, and that is tragic. But the 90 Afghanis who died are almost an afterthought. This concept that the suicide bombings only matter when it's Americans dying, as if we're a part of some kind of different race besides humanity, is what the right wing wants us to believe, that being born under the American flag somehow makes you special in the eyes of God. versus simply acknowledging the loss of life, and that this is standard for those people who live there.
10.
And they've been living in those conditions for 2 decades because of American intervention there
5.
and our lack of a plan to exit. So
Hold that thought.
over the courts, just as Malcolm said.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
We've lost a lot of service members and we've lost a lot of Afghani souls because of the suicide bombing yesterday at the Kabul airport. After the bombing, you had gunmen who came out and started shooting and killing everyone they could find. What is going on here, everybody? The Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. 773-763-9278 is my number. And I'm streaming live on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook, on WCPT 820's Facebook page, on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. page, and on Instagram, Santita Jackson IG, at Santita J on Twitter. I want to hear your thoughts. We've been talking with Malcolm Nance, who's been so generous with his time today, and I want to thank you for speaking with us, after your controversial day. I just think that, like I said to you, you don't need a filter. You need to be able to explain to yourself in more than, 216 characters or whatever it is on Twitter. I'm later for that. I think people want to hear what you have to say. Because I think that, you've deleted this tweet. You're saying, I know you didn't mean any harm, but it seems like to me the truth appears to be something that people are threatened by, or that, it's harsh. What you said was harsh. No, we've had terrorist suicide bombings over in Afghanistan almost daily for 20 years. What is wrong? That's true. This did not work for us. This occupation didn't work. That's why we have to go. That is why we have to go. So let's talk about this, and we've got to get on the same page. Chip Gibbons, this is something we've seen Chelsea Manning, we've seen Daniel Hale, we've seen Julian Assange, we've seen people who've tried to give us information about what's happened with drone attacks, what's been happening over in Afghanistan. They get the scarlet letters. Chip Gibbons.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I actually I want to say that I agree with what Malcolm Nance tweeted and deleted. My thoughts are with all of the people who died in yesterday's attack in Kabul, not just the 13 American service members, but of course, my thoughts are with them, but with the, I don't know if it's 85, 90 Afghan civilians who died as well. But, as tragic as that is, as Malcolm pointed out, there have been daily suicide bombings. War is violence. People die in wars. And that if you're horrified and if you're concerned by what happened yesterday, that's not a call for more war, right? If you look at people dying in a bombing and say, oh, I don't think we have enough war going on, we should be there for another 20 years, that's the exact opposite response that you should be giving. And we were also discussing, Biden's remarks about how he vows to get revenge on whoever did this. And, I'm not naive. I don't expect there to be a situation in which American service members are killed and the president doesn't go on TV and vows revenge. But it's important to remember that type of vengeful attitude is what helps sort of get us into Afghanistan in the first place. There was a very terrible terrorist attack. We were attacked on 9/11 by Al-Qaeda. It was a terrible tragedy, the deaths of nearly 3,000 civilians. And then, we went into Afghanistan with the original stated purpose of getting who carried out the attacks, although it's worth pointing out Osama bin Laden was killed by the U.S., not in Afghanistan, in Pakistan. He escaped very early in the war in Tora Bora into Pakistan. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the 9/11 mastermind for the 9/11 Commission, also captured in Pakistan. Abu Zabadeh, who was at the time considered the number 3 in Al-Qaeda, I believe that turned out not to be true. captured in Pakistan again. So, for 20 years, because of this sort of vengeance that we saw, we've been in this protracted war in Afghanistan. And, I mentioned I grieve not just for the U.S. service members, I grieve for the Afghans. This type of protracted war, whether you want to call it an occupation or a counterinsurgency, it takes an extremely heavy toll on civilian life, right? And I think that's why you see very early on in the war, and I mentioned this, the last time I came on, that just, a month into the war, the Washington Post was running front page stories about sort of people around the world who were horrified by 9/11 because they were horrified by the killing of civilians. But they were equally horrified by what was happening in Afghanistan. They didn't feel like this terror attack, this killing of civilians, gave us license to do the same thing. It was November 7th, 2001, front page Washington Post story was war support ebbs worldwide. September 11th doesn't justify bombing, many say. And it makes sense that if you are horrified by this horrible terrorist attack against U.S. civilians and you're Mexican, that the article focuses mainly a lot on opinions in Mexico, you're French, you're whatever, that same impulse is going to cause you to grieve for the loss of lives in Afghanistan. And very early on, it was clear that we were intentionally or unintentionally killing civilians in the war. Civilians always die in modern warfare. And I don't remember what media network it was, but they said we're not going to show images of civilian casualties because, right after 9/11, that's not what the country wants to see. So there's different forms of censorship. We're going to talk about truth tellers. There's different forms of censorship. There's official secrecy, but there's also unofficial secrecy. The fact that war is brutal, the fact that war is ugly, the fact that 20 years of occupation, 20 years of counterinsurgency takes a heavy toll on civilian lives is not a secret. It's not a secret to the people of Afghanistan, and it's not a secret to many of the conscientious people who serve in these wars. When I first got started organizing against the Iraq War, during the Bush years, I was helping to set up speaking events for members of a group that was then called Iraq Veterans Against the War, then became Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans Against the War, and now it's just called About Face because there's so many post 9/11 wars, you can't just limit it to two, who would share their experiences in Iraq, in Afghanistan, talking about what's it like to stop people at checkpoints on a day-to-day basis, talk about what it's like to engage in these sorts of raids. And, we're going to talk about Assange. I mean, it wasn't Afghanistan, it was Iraq where WikiLeaks released that video they called Collateral Murder of 2 U.S. gunships firing on a group of people, including 2 journalists. I mean, I actually watched that video in a room with one of the soldiers who was in it, and he had, in the intermediate time between that incident and the release of the video by WikiLeaks, he had become an anti-war activist. He struggled very heavily with PTSD. The military did not give him the care that he needed. And, there have been so many soldiers who have spoken out about what was going on. And of course, this isn't a secret to the civilians. And our media who, oftentimes sort of will say we care about the troops or what about the troops when they are sort of browbeating people into not criticizing the war, they don't give those soldiers a platform. They don't give them any sort of voice. I remember when, Iraq Veterans Against the War were having the winter soldier hearings at the National Labor Conference, and I would listen on Pacifica Radio. I would listen on alternative media and left-wing media, and it's, part of the reasons why I'm so grateful you have this program that you bring me on. But you didn't see it on CNN. You didn't see it in the big media. And that's been a huge problem. And so it's worth talking about these sorts of whistles. There's been a lot of dissenters throughout the Afghanistan war. Matthew Ho, who, I know you've had on your program, who resigned over protest of the surge, Chelsea Manning, who was based in Iraq and became very horrified by the civilian toll of the war and ended up publishing a bunch of documents about not just Iraq, but also Afghanistan, also the U.S. State Department and Guantanamo. Daniel Hale, who I know I've been on your program talk about before, who was in the Air Force, assigned to the NSA at Bagram as part of the capture and kill program of the U.S. and witnessing in real time, because they can see this all on a video screen, the civilian toll of this war. And then, of course, WikiLeaks, which I realize is a very controversial organization, but, they released, which was at the time the largest release of classified U.S. information. I believe they quickly surpassed that, the Afghan war diaries. And they did it, not as this fringe organization working in the shadows, but with The Guardian, a very respected British newspaper, the New York Times, the U.S.'s paper of record, and Der Spiegel, a very respected German paper. And, similar to Hale, it is Manning's revelations they published, similar to others, similar to the people I knew in Iraq Veterans Against the War 15 years ago. I mean, it depicted a heavy toll of the war on civilian life. It also showed the U.S. thought that Pakistan was supporting the Taliban. It also showed that al-Qaeda operations in Afghanistan were stronger even after, we had supposedly had all these great successes in the war on terror that people had said so. And I was looking through this quote from the time about when it was released, and Phyllis Bennis, who's an anti-war activist who's at the Institute for Policy Studies, she said the Afghan war diary did not reveal a war different from what we knew, but they provided a level of corroborating detail, often in clinically detached language. And I think that's the way we should look at these revelations, right? I think our media, our government could make a greater effort to go and discover the civilian cost of these wars. It's not a secret. The Afghan people are not unaware of what their day-to-day existence is. The Iraq people are not, unaware of what their day-to-day existence is. And this isn't just a thing that's unique to the U.S., right? Other countries that have engaged in this sort of protracted warfare, whether it's the French in Algeria or Israel and Palestine, I think that has the same type of toll on civilian life. I think we just have to just realize that as sort of the realities of this type of war. It's not a secret from them, and many people try to speak out, and these documents, for whatever reason, when you have documents from the U.S. government itself, it makes it harder for people to ignore you. So, you had so many brave truth tellers like the soldiers of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans Against the War, like independent journalists on the ground exposing what was going on, and that these sorts of documents really, really buttressed their claims. Unfortunately, no one has ever been held responsible for launching the Afghanistan war. No one was ever held responsible for launching the Iraq war, which was based on lies. And, Chelsea Manning did give classified information. Daniel Hale did give classified information to journalists, to the media. And they bore a heavy price for it. Chelsea Manning was subjected to treatment that was decided by the UN to be, at the very least, cruel and degrading and possibly torture. Daniel Hale is in a jail right now waiting for his transfer into the U.S. federal prison system. Julian Assange is in Belmarsh prison. Once again, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture has said he's been subjected to psychological torture. The UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention has found he's been subjected to arbitrary detention. He is awaiting sort of news of whether or not he's been going to be extradited to the U.S. It's a very convoluted and complex legal process they have over the United Kingdom, although they probably think our legal process is convoluted and complex. I've been covering the proceedings. And it's just sort of sad that the only people who have faced any sort of accountability, any sort of punishment in this war, have been the people who have spoken out and tried to bring us the truth. And in all of these cases, you can look at what the people said about their own motives, because they're always demonized in the media. They wanted us to know what the realities of war was. Chelsea Manning very clearly said in her chat logs that the government obtained in the run-up to the war that if the American people knew the truth of asymmetrical warfare, right, they would spark a policy debate. Daniel Hale has talked about watching civilians die on a television screen and seeing the president on TV talking about how clean and surgical and targeted our killing was. And Assange has made similar comments about how, these documents revealed the brutality of war and would change the discourse. And these are the people who have been punished. And it's also worth taking it one step further, and that, we were attacked on 9/11 by Al-Qaeda. We were attacked on 9/11 by these foreign terrorists. But, there were intelligence failings in this country, and the people who tried to raise the alerts about this, whether it was FBI agent Colleen Rowley or some people at the NSA, they also got punished as well, right? Everyone who has told the truth, everyone who has tried to do the right thing has been punished. And then John Bolton gets to come on NPR. George W. Bush gets to paint pictures. Tony Blair gets to lecture us about how withdrawing is imbecilic. I think that was the word he used. And it's just an incredibly sad situation. And there's no other word to use and say this makes me extremely sad. I know that may sound trite, but
No,
I'm just...
It's not trite. No, but that's why when Malcolm Nance tweets this out yesterday, I said he's a truth teller. Now, it wasn't harsh to me, but certainly, if you offend anyone, charge it with you in your case, Malcolm, charge it to your head, not to your heart. But anyone who deviates from a so-called official line, this is what happens. And this is why we're here. This is why we're here. This is why we're not leaving. We're being chased out. Because no one's going to tell the truth. The president, according to this Guardian report, with cold anger, I saw him said, to those who carried out these attacks today, as well as anyone who wishes America harm, know this: we will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay. Not when you have all these people still in there and thousands of troops. I don't know if you really want to say it that way. Let me just get a couple of calls in at the very least. Roosevelt from Chicago. It's been a long time. How you doing, Roosevelt?
Santita, thank you for taking my call. First
of course.
My thoughts and prayers to your mommy and daddy.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
They've been on my mind for quite a while since they were put in the hospital. So, with my best.
Thank you.
I remember that man from my high school days. I mean, and I thank you and the African American community, and particularly your mom and dad, for helping the Hispanic community. Always, and you yourself, always include us.
Well, so we are one, Roosevelt. So that's Malcolm. Malcolm tried to tell you, we are one now.
I appreciate that, and I hope Malcolm is still on the line, because I want him to correct me if I'm wrong on several things I want to say about the Taliban, and that is this. There were quite a number of presidents that weren't held responsible. There were never investigations, such as what Reagan did. After 241 Marines were killed, he started a war with Grenada. He withdrew troops from Lebanon back in 1983. So he was never held responsible for Iran-Contra. He had the Taliban in the White House calling them freedom fighters. So this comes a long way, even before George W. Bush started this mess. Okay? Trump himself, in Nigeria, there was never an investigation, and we know more about Benghazi that what Trump did, taking 12 days to react to what happened. Let's not forget Bush himself, when the towers came down. Look how long it took him and what he did and how creative he's responsible for this mess too. So I wanted to make those statements. You know, there's been presidents that start wars because they want to be reelected. Okay? Now, when it comes down to what happened, it's always going to be like this because we get involved in wars. I don't know if Malcolm agrees with this, that we don't understand. The reason why a lot of the things that are happening now with these people that are coming from Central America asking for our help is because the intervention of Reagan in those particular countries. We side by dictators that favor our country.
Roosevelt,
and that's
don't leave. Stay right there because I want to give Malcolm in these last 3 or 4 minutes a chance to respond to that and to these bigger issues. You've heard a lot, Malcolm, but I hope that you know that you've also heard support from us. I appreciate the fact that you tell the truth and you share your experience and God is your filter and that's it. So why don't you speak to what you heard from Roosevelt and from everybody, really?
Well, I just want to make one historical correction. Ronald Reagan did not meet with the Taliban. He met with the guys who would be the fathers of the Taliban, the Afghan Mujahideen, which were the insurgents that we put together to fight the Soviet Union. Their children, when displaced in Pakistan, would be the students who would be in these Islamic schools who would become the Taliban in the 1980s. That's just one thing. So, completely different group of people. Yes, Donald Trump did negotiate with the Taliban. He actually invited them. He was going to have them come to Camp David to sign this big peace agreement. And on September 11th, if he had been reelected president, which would have been horrible. And he wanted this grand, deal with the Taliban. When he signed that document, he signaled to every person in Afghanistan that the war was over and the United States was giving the keys to the Taliban. So many of them in Afghanistan started cutting deals with the Taliban. Entire government, figures, loaded their airplanes up and jumped on the airplanes because the Taliban did not defeat us militarily. The Taliban won an agreement which they violated, and then the Afghans chose the Taliban to give them the peace that they're going to have now, which is a very harsh, misogynistic, paternal, tribal-centered government, which we opposed in 2001.
So Malcolm, where do we go from here? Well, I mean, are we going to be what is next? I've got 2 minutes.
Well, okay, it's a new day. We need to understand that we have fought this war before. Afghanistan is just Vietnam with more mountains and sand, right? The environment, the people were about the same level. They were tribal, less, they had cities as major urban areas. And in the post-Vietnam War, we evacuated 7,000 American citizens out of Vietnam in 1975, but 2 million Vietnamese took to the water and took to the air. And you might recall the boat people who were for years escaping from Vietnam and came to the United States. We are going to have a new class of American citizens, the Afghan ally who come here. And that's what we need to look forward to. Whether Afghanistan becomes the North Korea of South Asia, that's entirely up to the Afghan people and the Taliban themselves as to what their destiny is. America no longer guides their destiny. We did not own Afghanistan. We do not own Afghanistan. We can only do some American counterterrorism operations from the periphery, and that's about it. The war in Afghanistan, when the last troop leaves here in a few days, will be officially over.
Will be over, but is there anything next in 30 seconds? Anything? Be our takeaway, Malcolm.
I'll tell you right now, when I actually finally heard the statistic of $2 trillion were dropped into the Afghan war over 20 years, with 90% of it going to American defense contractors. That didn't go to the government of Afghanistan. That came back to the United States in the war machine, maintaining the armed forces and running these combat operations at a deficit, I might add. That's a lot of money we could have been putting into the United States. So let's hope that there's a common sense factor that comes to play in the post-Afghan war, and that the future is that we can start healing our own broken nation. There are a lot of people here in this country who have hatred in their hearts. Okay, I can take it. I can take any death threat that you throw at me. I can take being called the N-word 100 times. I'm satisfied in knowing I've dedicated my life to keeping idiots like that safe from people who would come to our country and do harm. But now we have an internal problem. We have Americans who themselves are seeking to do harm. The American future is going to be healing the American nation and moving forward the American experiment.
Malcolm Nance, everybody, the author of The Plot to Betray America, U.S. intelligence expert. Go on and reach out to MSNBC. Give him some support. He deserves that. We need truth tellers. Dwight McKeon, Chip Gibbons, defending rights and dissent. And of course, on WAOK this Sunday, as in every Sunday, 12 to 3 Central Standard Time, 1 to 4 p.m., Robert Patillo, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push, his brilliant radio show. Everybody, much love. Thank you for all the prayers that you keep bringing into my parents and to my family. But let's give them to each other, everybody. We all need to pray for each other and love on each other. I can see you on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson this Sunday. God bless. Can I get some closing thoughts from everybody on the panel here? I think, Malcolm, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Very nice.
Oh, well, you were great, and I wanted you to know.
I haven't given.
No, go on, please.
I'm just saying, I haven't given you my thoughts and prayers for your folks, and you know how much I love your dad and your mom. So please, let's keep them in our prayers.
And they love you too. My father says, "Oh, I like that Malcolm. I like him."
I know.
He's just a decent young man. He's just a decent young man. I said, "Oh my goodness, there you go." He looks at you like you're a kid. He's such a decent young man. Such a decent young man. That's right. I said, okay. Yes, I know, Dad. He's such a decent young man. And he's smart. He loves that. He loves that. But let me get some closing thoughts from everybody. Chip Gibbons. Whew, what an overview you've given us. Because indeed, Julian Assange said that the media have been complicit in hiding the truth, hiding this great 20-year lie. And it seems like we've been caught flat-footed, by our unawares instead of really understanding what's going on. And shout out to Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from Minneapolis. From Minneapolis, she is trying to get Daniel Hale pardoned. Your closing thoughts?
Yeah, definitely shout out to Ilhan Omar. I've been in contact with her office in the last couple of weeks about Daniel Hale's case, and I've been in contact with her office for years about other similar whistleblower issues. She is absolutely one of the most courageous people we have in Congress, and speaking out for someone like Daniel Hale, who has been convicted under the Espionage Act for giving classified information to a journalist, is very, very politically dangerous for a member of Congress to do. And she was just so moved by his story and so compelled both by what he made public as well as how the government has treated him, as well as that very, very moving letter that he wrote, that she couldn't remain silent, and she went public. And I know that's a big risk for a member of Congress, and we're all extremely grateful for that. One of Daniel's friends called him in jail and let him know, and he was extremely, extremely heartened by this, because Omar is a hero of his, and I'm glad that made a difference for him, and I'm hoping more members of Congress will call on for Daniel Hale to be pardoned. We're certainly up on Capitol Hill. Well, not up on Capitol Hill because everything's on Zoom with COVID, but metaphorically up on Capitol Hill talking with officers about Daniel Hale and about all of these issues. And I guess my final thought is, it's really, really disturbing that in our society that people who lie about our foreign policy, no one was held accountable for lying about the Vietnam War. They tried to put Daniel Ellsberg in jail. They went after the anti-war movement with COINTELPRO. They did horrible things to soldiers who resisted, but no one was held accountable for it. In the 80s, we spent $2 billion funding the Mujahideen, part of which splintered off into the Taliban, which was, I think, a real unintended cost. But that was a cost of that. And if we go out for vengeance against the people who carried out yesterday's attacks, what will be the unintended cost of that? I think that's worth thinking about. So my thoughts are with all of the people who bravely told the truth about the war in Afghanistan, about the war in Iraq, about the war in Vietnam, about all of these other wars at great, tremendous cost to themselves, knowing that it's likely a lot of the media will ignore them and that people who tell lies about wars go much farther than people who tell the truth about them. And my thoughts are with the civilians and the people of Afghanistan. I mean, all of the headlines, mentioned the 13 service members. You have to read the article to find out about the 85 Afghans a lot of time. And like I said, this war has been very devastating for the civilian population of Afghanistan. And I fear for them under the Taliban. I have the utmost sympathy for them. But, all of these people who have suddenly come out of the woodwork after ignoring the Afghanistan war for decades, I mean, they've shown how much the media would talk about Afghanistan year by year, and like some year was like 5 minutes, right? And now they're all very concerned. What about the people of Afghanistan? What about the people of Afghanistan? But, the people of Afghanistan have been living under 43 years of war. What do you think that did to them? Another 43 years of war isn't going to make their lives better. I have no illusions about who the Taliban are. I have no illusions about why so many people want to flee Afghanistan, and we should be taking refugees in. We have a moral obligation. We helped destroy that country, not just for 20, but for 43 years. I think we have a huge moral obligation to do so. But, the answer isn't another decade of war. It won't make their lives better. And I think we should remember the human cost of war, both in terms of the civilians who die, the soldiers who have to live with what happened, and the people who risk their lives and careers to tell us the truth about the war and are punished either unofficially, thrown off television or whatever, or officially, like Julian Assange waiting in Belmarsh prison to face 17 counts under the Espionage Act in the Eastern District of Virginia, a place I doubt he's ever been. Chelsea Manning in torture-like conditions in pretrial detention. Daniel Hale sitting in jail in Virginia, those people. So that's who my thoughts are with today.
Amen to that. Let me go to you, Robert Patillo. You still there?
Yes, I'm here. And I think the most important thing that we have to realize is we're in a very pressured situation where Americans are out for blood. That good old American bloodlust where we say it's time to bomb somebody or don't really care who. And so we're going to need as much pressure from the anti-war movement, from the progressive movement on our political leadership as there is pressure coming from the political right. Because we're, even on so-called progressive and liberal networks, we're seeing these same bloodlust. If you're watching Morning Joe, they're talking about striking back at the Taliban for violating their deal. If you're watching CNN, they're talking about the military strategy of what needs to happen in Afghanistan. What needs to happen is we get the hell out of those people's country by next Tuesday and then get our people out and then allow them to run their own government. So we allow this bloodlust to overrun us, and then we end up back in the same situation, fighting a war that we cannot win on specious terms. And the people who will be dying will not be ISIS-K. It will be women and children, the same people that the political right claimed they wanted to protect last week will be catching bombs next week. So we have to put as much pressure from the left and from the anti-war movement, from the progressive side of the aisle, on the administration not to fall into their darkest angels, not to fall into what American foreign policy has always been. Weakness is not walking away. Weakness is starting a fight that you cannot win. But politically right now, that is what will be most advantageous to the administration, to save face on the withdrawal and the evacuation. So it's going to be a very wrought time trying to prevent us from going back into another war, redeploying, bombings of civilian targets, all in the name of retribution, which America has done throughout history.
Well, I mean, yeah, because I think the president saying that we will not forgive, and I mean, and he's exalted as, and he's a deeply religious man. I'm like, honey, that is not the thing you say. That's not the thing to do. That's not moving this along. It's not. Dwight McKee?
Well, if they kill our people, it's terrorism. If we kill their people, it's collateral damage. And so we have to stop subletting our moral authority to people just because they wave a flag in their faces on the money. Until we do that, they're going to manipulate the reality to their advantage. They're going to put us in these unjust wars, and they're going to kill people whose ultimately blood is on them and us because we refuse to really take a position and we brought the height.
Malcolm, do you want to say anything else before we go? Everybody, this has been quite the show. Malcolm, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Did you ask me?
Oh, yeah. I wanted you to close us out today.
Oh, okay. Well, my thoughts are just this. Like I said, we have now ended the Afghan war. That will happen here within another few days. What will take place after that will have to be a healing of America. We'll have to move on and see if we can end this internal war that we're having right now. The thought that Americans' bloodlust is not just bloodlust for foreign people and people of color and, those people that we perceive who are enemies. We're having an internal bloodlust. People who want to not just politically demonize other Americans. I think I said this before. I have a new book coming out here later in the year, and I started it last August, and it's a horrible book. I'm sorry I had to write it. But the title is called They Want to Kill Americans. And it's about Americans who want to kill other Americans. I got a taste of it yesterday. Like I said, ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other terrorists, they don't sit around tweeting about what they think of other people and tweeting death threats to each other. They go out and do. They are actors who do everything by deed. We have people here who are taking, tweets and comments by our former president and viewing those as orders to kill other Americans. We are in a seriously bad place. The very fact that I've had to spend 20 years in the armed forces defending the nation, then 15 more years in the intelligence community trying to work against our enemies in the shadows, to find out that I have 30, possibly 40% of the United States who believes that I'm the enemy and that I should be killed because I didn't vote for a certain person, or they believe that there's a secret cabal that is running the world and kidnapping all the children and that every liberal needs to be genocided. I'm reading their words, and they're dangerous, and they are in our country. It's the biggest insider threat that we have now. And ISIS Khorasan is laughing at us today. They hit us, and they watch us tear each other apart from the inside. That disgusts me. That disgusts my entire sense of honor. Like I said earlier, I can take the hits. Go ahead, say what you want to say about me, okay? But you threaten the lives of other American citizens over something someone says on social media. or that you believe that a virus which is ravishing this country and killing hundreds of thousands of your fellow citizens is a joke and a hoax, you're the person who's equally as dangerous as foreign terrorists. And we need to recalibrate ourselves as a nation. And it breaks my heart every time I have to discuss this subject, But now I've got people out there with guns, and they're bragging of what they can do about it. So let's recalibrate, as I said.
Well, this is what Dr. King, this is what killed him. I never knew a day in which I thought my father would live past 39, Malcolm. I grew up with armed security in my home and the police in front of our home. My brother was sent away to boarding school when he was about 10 or 11 because we were in such a threatened position here in Chicago and carrying my father's name. He didn't have the anonymity that Jesse, Johnny, and then Yusuf and Jackie and I had. Jesse didn't have it. He had to get my mother when we dropped him off at that boarding school, at that military school. She looked at me and she said, "You know what? I know your father doesn't want him to go away, but I've got to save our son. He doesn't know just how hostile it is here." So what you're dealing with is what really people who've tried to tell the truth have always dealt with. Medgar Evers was trying to tell the truth. They killed him. Malcolm X tried to tell the truth. They killed him. Gandhi tried to tell the truth. Killed him. I mean, this is what we do all over the world. And everybody, we need to stop. You just need to stop. And I repeat, I've just saw on my chat line, bless your heart, I don't want to add any more light to this. But we can agree to disagree, but we can't do it disagreeably. I don't want anyone to be disrespected here. And I don't assume that anyone is less smart than I. I'm never thinking that I'm the smartest person in the room. I don't make any assumptions about anyone. You only know what people tell you about themselves. You really don't know who people are. You really don't know what experiences they have. I just require Cesar, Savannah, Dave, Vicky, everybody, that no one should walk away from this show feeling diminished. Because you're right, Cesar. As my father said, everybody is somebody. So treat everybody like they're somebody. Treat somebody like they're God's child. Because that's what my father also said in that litany, in that chant. I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I am black, I am proud, yellow, black, brown, and white. We're all precious in God's sight. You don't have to have a degree. You can have as many degrees as you want. Whatever it is, you deserve to be respected here. And we don't talk down to each other. We don't talk at each other. We talk with each other. And sometimes it gets heated, and that's okay. But you will respect people here. Otherwise, you don't belong here. I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to add to an environment in which Malcolm gets called the N-word. That is, we don't need to be there. We don't need that. And it starts with the first bad thought. That's where it starts. And we're going to stop that. That's why I do what we do here. And that's why I do it this way. Because we have some of everybody from every conceivable background here. And I like that. I like having a rainbow tribe here. And I like having people who don't agree with everything that's said. I saw a lot of that. I saw some of that today, and that's fine. That's fine. But I do require that we be respectful. Have some rules, and they are welcome to have them. But me, I don't believe in name calling. Maybe it's because I lived so much of my life being on the other side of having a name called, having my name called. I dealt with teachers who were hostile before I got to college. I get it. I dealt with people who would say to me, I can't wait for your father to die. I picked up the phone many times, Malcolm. Hi, young girl. Hi, young lady. Hi, little girl. Ooh. Is your father home? No, sir. Okay, he was wearing a trench coat when he left today. Yes, sir. Well, call your father at his office and let him know that if he comes home, I'm going to blow his effing brains out. So you can imagine at 8 or 9, I'm desperately I go to my mother, and I don't know what to tell her because I don't want to upset her. But at 8 or 9, I felt that way. I felt that protective. And I had finally had to tell her, Mom, if he comes home, they're going to kill him. I don't want my daddy to come home tonight. I know what that's like. That's all I ever knew growing up. I will not have a filthy environment here. I don't want anyone to ever feel what I felt in those moments. I'm not going to have it. So everybody, please like and share. Like and share, like and share, like and subscribe. I'll see you this weekend on Reverend Jackson. Maybe we'll get him to call in. I'm not so sure. He is doing better, but I'm going to see. But we'll certainly be talking about this and so much on Reverend Jackson's show on Sunday. But we will be up and live on Sunday. Malcolm, Nance, thank you for being a hero, not just to me, but for so many others. Thank you. Thank you for being a truth teller. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for really fighting to make America what it's supposed to be. But Dwight, you've done that. Chip Gibbons, you've done that. Of course, Robert Patillo, you've done that. And I have to say my other guest, Dr. Shanina Knighton, she does that. Pastor Tisha Williams, all of their service. Paul Chivari, my board operator. It's kind of hard in progressive radio because, we are really trying to make it from day to day. But, there are a lot of views that we represent here. And we want everyone to be heard. And we want everyone to be respected, everyone to be protected. So just remember that, everybody. I love you. Love you, everybody. God bless you. Thank you so much for your prayers. Oh, Lynn, you said you're sorry I had to put up with such negativity. I did, but you know what? But I had my pastor, I had my church, I had my parents, God. I have that. It's, it's all right. I tell you what, going through that made my brothers, my sister, and I appreciate every holiday because we never knew from Thanksgiving to Christmas. We were clear that the fact that we were together was a triumph. Because I know Dr. King's children. I know how much they miss him today. I know Malcolm X's children. I know how much they miss him today. I know Rena Peppers and her siblings, one of whom died very young. I know that. Trust me, I know this. Rena said to me, you know what? I feel saddest for you out of this whole group because your nightmare never ended. Rena was not 10 years of age. Her father would teach them to drop, tuck, and roll in their house. And then sadly, one night in June of 1963, it happened. They heard the shots and they dropped, they rolled. When the shots stopped, they opened their door and their father was bleeding to death, having been shot to death. He was dying, trying to make his way up the stairs to get to his family. That's what that girl saw. And when we have ugly talk, it comes from this ugly talk. Don't have it here. We're going to spread love and we're going to spread respect. Let's put love in action. Love everybody. I'll see you on Sunday and God willing on Monday. Love you, love you, love you. God bless you. See you on Sunday and have a great day. Thank you so much, Malcolm.